sure how many people we've got coming. Since Shirley is here, do you think we should just start? Or, yeah, you don't want to.
Sure.
Wait a minute, just disappeared again.
Oh, I'm right here. I'm just getting.
Oh, okay. You took you took a rest from your picture.
That's the Lietse Shwala, the spirit of the Shwala. So she is the woman that guides me. She came to me in my dreams. There were 3 women that came with big round wooden masks with rosy cheeks and big lips. And they came into our smokehouse and they had a trail of dancers behind them. And I could see that their lips were moving when they were singing. And so I dreamt of her in probably like 2014. And then in 2015, one of our elders that is on our board, and I don't know if I could share screen or not.
I think so, yeah.
All right, let's go to share a little story here. So one of our elders, I went to visit him, and this is also spiritually connected to me that there's too much to tell to help people really understand. But this elder right here, his name was Stolkolth, and that's after San Juan Island. His father named him Stolkolth because he didn't want him to forget who he is and where he comes from. And he wrote the book called The Saltwater People because he didn't want his children to forget their inherent birthrights to the land, to the water, to the reef net, to the salmon, and to the language that belongs to it. So my partner's grandma was one of the 3 women that came to me, and her name is Marianne Olson. And then his grandma is Cecilia Elliott. So his mother used to travel out into the islands with all women, and they would travel as fast as a school bus. And I guess they would have a special word that would call the whales, and the whales would come up and they would protect them from the rough waters. But he introduced me to his mother when she was 95 years old. And
Wow.
he brought me over this little storyboard right here that it was about 2 feet high. And he said he made it for his mother for her birthday 2 years before that. And I couldn't say anything. I just had goosebumps. And because all of this regalia right here, this reef net captain hat, it came to Troy, and it's the Quinilian, the reef net captain. And he has a net draped around him. But on the left side of his leg was the woman's face that I dreamed of, the 3 women. And so when we met National Park Service Superintendent Lee Taylor in 2014, here is our ancestral homelands. This is where his father was born. Here's where the 3 sisters, they wrote depositions and they said, we come from here, and they wanted to be recognized as the people from here. This is called the Lummi Creation Island back here, and this is English Camp or Pupiawith. And so his name's Stolkolth, and it comes from here, and his father was born here. And so when I first met National Park Service Lee Taylor, we went down there because our community out Lummi, they were looking at the different reef net sites. And we learned that we had the 600, 800 foot longhouse that was shared between Saanich and Lummi and other Strait Salish people. And I said, there was nothing to show our existence except for the clam middens. And I asked her, what would it take to put a reader board up? And she says, oh, the federal government is so slow, it would take 10 years to put a reader board up. And then 8 months, Uncle John shows me that photo of the little reef net. And I went back home, and I happened to have $44,000 left from a Native Student Success Grant. And I asked Jewel James, our Sovereignty Treaty Protection Officer, because he believes in our work and he understands that what we're doing is sovereignty treaty protection, which is a layer of environmental protection. I said, Jewel, I said, I'm imagining this reef net captain and a male and female salmon because we want to honor them as salmon people. I said, what would it take to commission you to do the male and female salmon? And he says, because I'm envisioning that Saanich, our friends and relatives from Saanich, will do the reef net captain. And he says, oh, don't worry about it. He says, you just give the money to our friends and relatives from Saanich. And if it wasn't for Jewel, we would have never been able to accomplish this, because I didn't have enough money and I knew it. But the 2016, my partner Troy knew it was going to be the 100th centennial anniversary. And so we knew we could get our foot in the door. So we asked them, can we give you a gift? You know, and can we give you a gift for the centennial? And the Lee Taylor, the first superintendent, left, and she says, you know, we want you to tell your story. We don't want to keep telling your story for you. And then the second superintendent came in, and he was an intern, and he knew our work, but he says, I don't think we could, we can use it for, we can accept the gift, but we can't accept it for the centennial. And then 3 months before the centennial, Alexis Freedy comes in there, and she says, we are doing this for the centennial. And so it took us 8 months from seeing the storyboard to putting it into our ancestral homelands, where we had a 600, 800 foot longhouse. So right back here, Gus Island it's called Lummi Creation Island. And we had our burial site back there. And when the British came in, they burnt down the burial site and tore down the longhouse. And so it's just absolutely amazing that we got to honor from Stolkolth and his brother Charles this storyboard between Saanich and Lummi. And that reminds me of what his father's, what I say is, as respected elders have said, the Creator gave us a sacred responsibility to the land, to the water, to the reef net, to the salmon, and to the language that belongs to it. And if it's not supported, it's cultural, spiritual genocide. And in the last 160 years, we're dislocated and disassociated from our land, territory, and way of life. Our inherent right to clean food and water is being violated. Our reef net technology, which is the most respectful, sustainable way to produce the most high quality salmon, we were forced out or outlawed. Our wild salmon is at 5% or less of hanging on. And as 60 nations at the Royal BC Museum, we're known as saltwater salmon people. Our language is at 4.1% of hanging on. So I feel like my spirit tells me that if we do not remember that we are the salmon people, and salmon people have no borders, and we're all salmon people indigenous to Mother Earth, and that we have to work together to help save our environment. We one mind for the purpose of the work. Sorry, that was too long. I apologize.
No, it wasn't.
Okay, let's get started with the however you would like to get started.
Well, why don't you just keep going and tell us what you'd like to tell us, because we probably don't know it.
Okay, well, I hope this can be informal, like a coffee time, and we can
Okay.
all build relationships and have friends, learn to become friends. And I appreciate you all sharing my, allowing me to share my story, or inviting me to share my story. And I only can come as a humble human being and a Stevenson, trying to do the best job that I can. We're trying to do the best job that we can. My traditional name is Kusamat, and it was gifted to me by my great grandmother, Sadie Celestine Jones, and it belonged to my grandma, Hannah Celestine. And from what I understand, she's from Esquimalt, and I am a member and resident of Lummi Nation. My maternal and paternal bloodline have pretty much been placed here within the bounds of the Lummi Reservation for the last 7 generations. I am a registered nurse. I've been in nursing since 2002, and I predominantly just was room. Oh, I'm not sure if somebody's talking to me, but I could hear background noise. So it was coming in pretty loud. If anybody has questions, just feel free to let me know.
Yeah, we should mute. Everyone should be muted other than you.
Okay. But I went into nursing in 2002, and I primarily did Western scope nursing from 2002 to 2014. 2002 to 2009, I worked off reservation and in skilled nursing. And then I was asked to go and help create the satellite medical at the Lummi University. And I can hear like a dog barking now. Or
Can we all mute ourselves so that when she's speaking, we're not speaking? Everybody hit mute. Maybe.
all right, thank you. I hope you don't mind
Oh, no.
on mute. All right. But I worked off reservation, and you know, a lot of skilled nursing is distributing a lot of pharmaceuticals, and working with my youth and finally coming back to our reservation to share my skills and my talents with my community. I really got, coming from historical trauma, and seeing the high rates of substance abuse and trauma with our own youth. I don't know if you're familiar with the Adverse Childhood Experience Study, but in Washington State, our youth were 3 times the rate of other Washington State residents, and our adults, our staff was 2 times the rate of state. So just understanding we have a lot of historical trauma. And then in 2014, you know, my role was administration, medical and health service management, and but children are primarily well. So a lot of administration work. And in 2014 was the time of Whatcom, Cherry Point, which you all are probably very familiar with. The Army Corps of Engineers upheld our treaty rights, which was historical for our Lummi people. But the SSA developers, from what I understand, came in and said, you Indians have no rights because you don't even practice anymore, which we do practice, but we were forced onto the Lummi Reservation, and we've had to really advocate for our rights, as you understand. But there's all these loopholes. Well, Whatcom came in, and I was dealing with 16, 17 years old, and one day this youth comes in and he says, Shirley, what are these white lines on my teeth? And I don't like them, he told me. And so I start doing research on fluoride, and found out that we had 10 pumps in our community. And I start looking down our block and seeing how many of our people had endocrine disruption and thyroid problems and cancer and pituitary problems, and just started to get very concerned and did a lot of research. So started to get concerned about our inherent right to clean food and water, and doing education with our community on that, knowing Bellingham had taken that fluoride out of our water. And then I start feeling, when I knew that our killer whales also had the same endocrine disruptions as our people, and those are our friends and relatives from the deep. And our job is to protect our friends and relatives from the deep. And then as a nurse, I start thinking, how am I ever going to, it felt overwhelming. How am I ever going to help people? I'm supposed to be a nurse and I'm supposed to be helping people. How am I ever going to truly help them? And when the killer whales only have 25 years to live, and if they beach themselves, they're treated like toxic waste. I felt like our children were going to end up growing up and they would have babies, and those babies would be born with cancer. And you kind of started to see it on TV. There's all these children, being born with all of these health problems already. And so it became like, I moved out of my Western frame. How do you build true capacity utilizing Indigenous models for Indigenous communities? So I went outside of that and I start focusing on Indigenous public health, what I call Indigenous public health. And because without the environment, you don't have your health. And when the youth came in and they were doing what Chiakum, my partner, the tribe council asked him to bring our reef net to Cherry Point, and because that was where we reef net, and I would ask the youth that would come into my office, do you know anything about our treaty rights? And they would say, no, I don't. They didn't know about it. And I'm like, oh my goodness, these children are going to grow up, and if they don't know about our treaty rights, how are they going to help with the continued protection of who we are? And we've become assimilated over, that was the goal, kill the Indian, save the man, and it's not our fault. Our hereditary chief always told us that we don't know our, culture, language, governance, history, who we are and where we come from. He always said, you must remember who you are and where you come from. So I like to say, as respected elders have said, the first part of any healing process is to know who you are and where you come from. And I like to say, as a nurse and as neuroscience, epigenetics, adverse childhood experience, and resilience is now showing memory is stored in DNA. So when I look at root cause of trauma for our community, and I look at us being dislocated from place, I can see that. I can see why our community would turn to substance abuse when you're dislocated, when your village sites are burnt down, when your families are separated, when your natural way that you potlatch and sing and dance and share wealth and resources is outlawed. I can see that sorrow that you hold in your DNA. And I could see why it's affecting our community. And I could see this medicine wheel. I could see the medicine wheel where the spiritual, mental, physical, emotional, and the Western world has us in the physical and the mental. I think I consume and I do not feel. And before COVID, that's really where we were at. I think, I just consume. And we don't know that we're not even, it's like an iceberg. I've seen an iceberg where the top of the iceberg, ignorance is bliss. We're all happy, And then on the bottom is the public education. And there's not any public education. And so we don't know that every single element that we are using, from our clothes to our cell phone cases to everything, is petroleum based and coal based, and we're blowing up mountains over on the other side, and our friends and relatives from the deep and our friends and relatives from the sky, all life is being affected, and we're not educated about it. And so I wanted to get these youth out of their games and their TV, and I wanted to give them a play space. According to Healthy People 2020, new social determinants of health, places where health begins. And I wanted to also address trauma that was even happening within my own family, because I do believe my partner holds the DNA of our salmon people. He's our quintillion, he's our reef net captain. And I do believe, because our wild salmon are becoming extinct, and I do believe because his family was forcefully separated by the border, and we don't even know each other as salmon people anymore. And that they told Stokel's dad, you go home or you go to jail. You go home or you go to jail. And he says, I was thrown into fourth world poverty. His family was thrown into fourth world poverty. So I felt like if I could bring my community back to place, then we would start the healing process. If my partner can heal, if our elders can heal, then our children can heal, and then the epigenetics can heal. And so the interesting thing, I love fluff. I love that our oral stories, when people would think, oh, we're just native and we talk too much, but we have these oral stories. We're going to the smokehouse and you're taught to sit there and listen. Like, I was in smokehouse for 18 hours in Alert Bay, and it was the most beautiful thing I ever witnessed. And I can imagine the wealth of our people and how we were as efficient as honeybees in our potlatch and our giveaway. And when we go in, we show our spirituality and we show our wealth. And if you were to look at, and it shows the circle of life of who we are as saltwater salmon people. And then when you go outside of that big house, you see assimilation, and you see poverty, and you see dysfunction, and you see chaos. And it's the human psychology that has been put upon us as people, to where we want to be divided within our borders, within borders, within borders. So I thought I would bring people back out to our ancestral homelands. And what that becomes is, it becomes the highest form of environmental protection. When I look at the two sectors that have impacted Indigenous people the most since contact, it's been the educational sector. We were put into boarding schools. Kill the Indian, save the man. Give me any child, I will make any man. When you look at the policy that impacted our Indigenous people, from the Doctrine of Discovery to, and what I learned about the Doctrine of Discovery is when the Europeans came over to Portugal and Spain and implemented all of their policy and their Doctrine of Discovery, the Papal Bull. The human psychology of it is, they knew that if they could impact the people to where they would lose their cultural identity, then they would perpetuate the same violence on other people and on their own. And so then we see the same thing happening when Columbus comes to the America, to perpetuate that same violence and disregard and marginalization and almost made up law. I would say it's very made up law. Who makes that law? And when I think of the physical and the mental, I think I consume and I do not feel. We're in that system of oppression. We're in that, what they call that institutional racism now. We're out of balance with our medicine wheel, our spiritual and an emotional. We can't think for our brother and sister from the deep. We can't, we no longer feel for them. or we no longer feel for the Mother Earth. So I do believe when our elders say you must remember who you are and where you come from, I think it's important for everyone to figure out who they are and where they come from. Because somewhere we got disconnected. Somewhere that medicine wheel that lives inside of us became disconnected and out of balance. When you see our patriarchal, there's a video by Kathleen Anderson, and she's a nurse, and she goes through and she teaches government agencies, and she goes through and teaches all of these hospitals, and she talks about the historical trauma and the patriarchal dominance and why nurses eat their own. And it's very similar to what we have gone through as Indigenous people. And when you think about that male and female balance, the spiritual and emotional, the medicine wheel, for Indigenous people, we know that when you have male and female balance, you have direct connection to the Creator. There is male and female balance in all things, right? My stones that I hold right here, they have male and female balance. So what happened to our male and female balance? You could tell we're out of balance with Mother Earth. We are violating Mother Earth. And so where is our male and female balance within ourselves? And even our reef net, our Aboriginal fishing technology, which has it took non-natives 10 years to learn that reef net fishing technology. And then it was stolen. It was outlawed, and we were forced out or outlawed from it. So where is that balance, and what is the solution? I had questions here, so I'm going to share my screen again a little bit, and I'm going to go back to this copy right here. And that's a little bit about who I am, but when I think about who we're talking about when we refer to Indigenous people of the land, one activity that I liked when I attended Western is people had the opportunity to go and to acknowledge where they came from. Where were you born? Were you born here in Bellingham? Where is your birthplace? And do you know the Indigenous people of that land? And so if you don't mind taking a moment of going around and acknowledging your birthplace and your family and your mother and father and who the Indigenous people of that birthplace would be. Thank you all so much for sharing your stories, and you know, I listen to who you are and where you come from, and you know, Michael, all that healing work that we hold inside of our DNA that needs to be done for ourselves so we can pass it on to our 7 generations. I always find it interesting how our ancestors always thought 7 generations ahead of us, and you know, now we have science who understands that we can carry the historical trauma for 7 generations. They can study our blood and the how trauma affects our blood and the demethylation, but we also have resilience. And I'm very thankful that, you know, I come from the survivors of the flood. And now we're facing the industrial flood. And how do we face this industrial flood when we have lost our connection to place, to our ancestral homelands, to the archipelago of the Salish Sea, to who we were as a potlatch society or reef net? How do we reconnect? And You know, on this little map here, it shows all of these village sites, and it shows that our people were plentiful before colonization and as saltwater salmon people. So there's a book that is out from Professor Nick Claxton. He's a member of the Sandwich Nation, and he wrote a book in partnership with Price, Professor John Price. And if you haven't read it, it's called Whose Land Is It? And so it talks about the Paris Treaty and our Oregon Treaty and the Hudson Bay Company and the international, how the international border was created and how all of these village sites were here and how there were actually more indigenous people than there were non-indigenous, and how the land for Vancouver Island was gifted to the Hudson Bay before it was even Canada. So sometimes you wonder about all of these international laws and national laws and state laws and who makes up all these laws and how do they do it? So whose land is it? And it becomes it becomes an illusion. Feels like we're dealing with an illusion sometimes, and we're allowing it to happen. And why are we allowing that to happen? So who are we talking about when we refer to the indigenous peoples of this land? You probably recognize indigenous people always talk about their lineage, who we are and where we come from. My family, my name Kusama, as I said, comes from Vancouver Island, Esquimalt, Souk area. I also come from the lineage of Chief Seattle. So my grandfather, Dr. Joseph James, was known to be nephew to Chief Seattle. He was brother, Kikakatum. My grandfather, Peter James and George James, helped start the Duwamish Tribal Organization in 1914 to 1960. They did a lot of court testimony. My grandfather, Peter, was born at the fork of the Duwamish River, and he testified for the old people who couldn't speak the Chinook language. And he had to testify about our village sites being burnt down and where our village sites were at, and basically corporations won out. They wanted to capitalize on the resources in the Duwamish territory, and so our Duwamish descendancy was not recognized, and still not is not recognized today. But I have Dr. Joseph James, Peter James, George James, Virginia, my grandma Jinx, my grandma Goose, grandma Irene, my grandma Jinx, my dad Virgil, and myself. So like 7 generations from that lineage. I also come from, you'll recognize the houses Teethlam. So I come from the 4th brother, Lord Jim Balch, and you can read about him online from the Clallam. Jamestown Sklallam. I have Lord Jim Balch, Solomon Balch, Aurelia Balch, Sadie Celestine Jones, my grandma Rena, my mom, and then me. So 7 generations. From what I understand, with Lord Jim Balch's, their village sites were being burnt down, and he was going to try to purchase land. He purchased land for 500 gold coins and then didn't understand taxes and lost that land, but worked to try to keep his people in that location. And then I also come from the 6th brother, and that is the Seaholm lineage. So my grandma Mary Hollis Seaholm was Seaholm's brother. So I have Mary Hollis. She married Edmund Fitzhugh, who was one of the first coal mine directors of Edmund Fitzhugh of Whatcom County. My grandma Mary was Samish and Clallam. And from what I understand about Edmund is when the Lummies which I wouldn't say Lummi as I learn who I am and where I come from, were pushed onto the federally reserved lands that we're now on. Edmund would only hire the Clallam people and not the Lummi people. So you could see the human psychology that's going on to start lacking resources, not being able to acquire our food wealth, our natural wealth, where we had potlatch systems and where we intermarried and we shared our wealth with each other. We strengthened our ties with each other. So you could see the poverty that our people were going into as Clallam are now having wealth where Lummi are not having that wealth. So my grandma Mary, she married her second husband, and she had William, so she married Billy Lear, and that's where my lineage comes from. So she married Billy Lear Sr., so Billy Lear, my grandma, Billy Lear Jr., my grandma Irene, my grandma Jinx, my dad, and then myself. And then I also come down from the seventh brother. But what amazes me about our people before contact is that we easily traveled. Like when I said, Stolkol's grandmother would get in a canoe and they would wait for the tide, or they'd wait for the rock at Sydney Island to go underwater, and they would travel as fast as a school bus into the San Juan Islands. When I think of Chief Seattle, and he had a longhouse over here on Hall Island, and then he also had descendancy over into the Cowichan territory by Ladysmith on Vancouver Island. And then on Vancouver Island, you know, where Twassen Ferry comes in, we had a village site here and a village site on this side. And then we had a village site over in Bellingham, near Penelakut. And so how connected we were as people, and how when we would have potlatch, you think a potlatch would be like our canoe journey, where we brought 30,000 people showed up in front of my house during 2019 canoe journey, and the Lummi people fed 8,000 to 10,000 people a day for free. That's a representation of potlatch, the giving of wealth. In 1910, in one of the museums, it's recorded that our Lummi people brought in what they equated as $10,000 to the potlatch, and then the potlatch was outlawed. But that was recorded in Canada. And so as a people, our potlatch would really help us manage our resources, our fisheries, or our resources, and to help share our wealth with each other. And when I'm on webinars today and we're dealing with this pandemic that we have, and we get in on philanthropy sites and they're talking about how they've never operated in this manner before, how they can get so many food boxes out to different people, and how they're really working together as a people. When I'm thinking that was our system as a people before contact, is to share our wealth, and to when we think the Creator gave us our sacred gifts and responsibilities, the Creator gave us a sacred gift to the land, to the water, to the reef net, to the salmon, and to the language that belongs to it, then it's our sacred responsibility to care for those gifts. And how easy it is, and 160 years later, now we're facing a pandemic and we're all having to wear masks. And it shows the impact that we're having to our environment with climate change and whatnot. And everyone is doing their part to be active. But as an Indigenous people, when I say I come from Duwamish, Esquimalt, Suk, Sewali, Chilliwack, I come from Clallam, Samish. So if we come from here, after the signing of the Point Elliott Treaty in 1855, then all my lineage gets placed here. because we were forcefully removed from our ancestral homelands. So when you think about those men who were providers for our family, and you think about how sorrowful that must have felt, can you imagine providing for your family, your home, and your livelihood, and then all of a sudden being thrown into fourth world poverty? So you can see the impact of the historical trauma and the choices you would make to numb that trauma and the outcome of it. And they don't, with epigenetics now, they don't even, sometimes you don't even know what's unlocking that DNA, what's unlocking the memory. So maybe you're doing your healing process, but something comes in and it awakens that memory and you don't know what it is. So we have a lot of healing work that we have to do as a community, and your advocacy and your education and your even stating the names of the people who belong to that land. If we visits or we think of what we're dealing with today with science, when we speak those names, when we speak this language of the land, when, you know, I was it Kathleen or Marianne talked about how our language is not being spoken of this land, but Stolquolf, the elder that was named after San Juan Island, he was sought out by East Indians, and he was honored with a PhD because they sought him out because they knew he was trying to carry his father's legacy on of keeping the language of the land, and that they noticed that our language of this land holds the creation sounds, the one syllable creation sound. So how sacred is that? Because Arwachlummi Chasen, Sen Chothan, Hulkamenum, we're all very similar in our dialect of our language. But what we fear, you know, when we ask for thriving culture and we ask for a thriving environment, the sad part about it is when all of this is Troy's inherent birthright of this map. And it shows our old village sites that we had, and it shows our old reef net sites, and it shows where we harvested the black ducks and the different natural resources. And when the environment is destroyed, our language is destroyed. Like Stolquolf's name's right here in the center. Puckbeowith, where we placed our storyboards, is right here. Lachlinquet, Henry Island, is right here. Tamasinthut, the one that Stolquolf's brother is Tamasin, and he is probably in his 80-year-old now, and Stolquolf is probably in his 70s. But this island right here, Tamasin, it means that the water is going back and forth, back and forth. So our people knew the environment so intimately that there's a breadth of feeling that's behind the word of our place. And so the environment gets destroyed, our language gets destroyed. How sad is that? And why would we want to destroy anybody's language? We should be lifting each other up. And when you think of our reef net technology being the most respectful, sustainable way to produce the most high quality salmon, yet there are 11 in operation. They're all non-native owned, except for just recently when we had a tribal member name his commercial vessel after the spirit of the Shwala, the woman's face that I showed you. When we think about up here, I don't know if you know about Salt Spring Island, but during Kinder Morgan environmental impact statement, a professor was flying above and he thought he seen a man-made wall. So he went to the First Nation and he asked, and they said, yes, we cultivated and harvested. So we would clean the beaches of all the rocks and we would build a wall. And what that does is it allows the 3 different types of clams to flourish. And then we would put the clam middens up against the wall, and what that does is it allows the nutrients and the sea urchins to come in. So our people had our own refrigerator right here. So can you imagine during 2019 canoe journey how fast our people could travel together into the Salt Spring Island and build that 1 mile rock wall, we would be described, when on contact, Indigenous people were described as lazy and as gluttons and as savages. But can you imagine, now science is figuring out why we did that? And we have the most respectful, sustainable way to produce the most high quality salmon. Yet our children don't get credit when they're in field. Our culture bearers don't get credit, don't get paid to teach our children. But as Indigenous people, we could stand beside archaeologists and anthropologists, and they can talk about our reef net technology like we're anthropological curiosities. And they're the ones that get paid for this. So there's an imbalance with our educational system. And then you have over here on Galiano, we have a man-made lagoon where we harvested our salmon. On one side of the lagoon, there's all of these clam middens on that side. And for 3,000 years, our people packed them over to the other side. And now those clam gardens, they flourished. But now, like my partner Troy says, we're all under the Department of Commerce because they took our probably village sites and put their military bases right here and moved our people out of our ancestral homelands. But when we think about what we're going to do to help protect the environment and to protect our health and our sovereignty, to practice our treaty rights, we all know that that helped at Whatcom. And so we need education and support from people to continue that journey of helping others understand how important it is to put that into our educational system so that people know that our treaties are our supreme laws of the land and that they really should be honored. They should be honored and not broken, but we see that is being broken all the time. So let me go back to right here and tell you a story. If we were able to honor our treaty rights, I would like to say a quote. I asked these two women if I could break down a summary of what I thought they were saying. So I like to say, as the Chalangeth inherent birthright supersedes treaties in First Nation territory, Louise Mandel, QC First Nation Aboriginal treaty rights lawyer, and as treaties and public trust are two essential tools to help protect the environment, Mary C. Woods, environmental law scholar from Oregon. We have two non-native individuals, lawyers, that are saying, look to the Indigenous people to help be a level of the environmental protection. So White Swan Environmental is a native-led nonprofit. Our mission is to support community healing through the natural, cultural, and historical restoration to the Salish Sea for 7th generation sustainability as a measure of ecological health protection for all. We are the vision keepers for a Coast Salish Tribal Heritage Field Institute, an Indigenous-led 13 Moon Mountain to Sea Reef to Reef K through PhD program. So addressing the educational sector, there is no way our children are going to be able to get away from not being able to meet the Washington State guidelines. So if we were able to seek support to have a Coast Salish Tribal Heritage Field Institute and put our 7 longhouses back in our San Juan Islands and 7 longhouses back in the Gulf Islands, can you imagine how fast our people would be able to do the restoration work? Because they know they've been here for over 15,000 years. So to look to the First Nation and to give them the opportunity to have the culturally safe places back. So we've been working on that. And this little excerpt right here is from, this is the Swan. This is my Swan family from Clallam. And this is the archipelago of the Salish Sea. And there's a story from the Lummi Indians of Northwest Washington. And it was recorded in 1930 by Stern. And in the beginning, there were 2 brothers who were placed on earth in Somain. Finding no livelihood, the older brother moves to Saanich, Malahat, The younger brother, Swatan, our first mythological man, moves to Garrison Bay, San Juan Island, Lummi territory. To both brothers, the Creator gifted the reef net, the salmon, the spear, the suin, and the fire. All of those gifts have been gifted to my partner, Troy, and he gifts them to me. The last gift that he was given was the spear from Susha. When we received that gift, I had to go to Point Roberts, our ancestral fishing ground, reef net site there, where we shared with various tribes as well. But from this site, there's a 9-foot boulder that fell into our site, and it is symbolic of our suin, the male and female stones that I hold here. So this one's the male one, and it has my fingerprint. And the Creator threw the stones and created the islands for our people. And this is the male, and it shows the San Juan Islands and the Gulf Island, the Vancouver Island. And the Creator threw the stones, and our people returned to our ancestral homelands. We honored the reef net captain. We honored the salmon people. We have the spear. The suin are the male and female stones that come to across the water. And the fire is the papiawe. And so papiawe is rotten wood. And that's where the English camp is now. It's called papiawe. And so Swatan, our first mythological man, he was whittling on a piece of rotten wood, and the Creator came down and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm lonely." So the Creator gave him a gift of the woman made out of rotten wood. But Uncle John said that his father, Dave Elliott, of the saltwater people, would travel at nighttime, and the old people would make Uncle John sit at the front of the canoe, and all he could see were the stars in the sky, and all he could hear were the sounds of the water, the paddles hitting the water. And they would make him be quiet, because you have to respect the friends and relatives from the deep. And so now science today, it's showing us that when there's so much traffic that's going through our friends and relatives from the deep, they can't track the salmon, which were almost extinct, can't track the salmon, so it increases their metabolism, and then they starve. And so those values that are, those stories that our old people would talk about over and over and over again, how amazing is that it's finally meeting science today? The 7 generations, the epigenetics, the must be quiet to respect our friends and relatives from the deep. All of those values, you know, we want to hang on to what our elders have taught us. So we go back to this one, the we map, the taking care of our homelands and culture. So what we're doing with our programming is to teach our young people taking care of our homelands and our culture. And so the ceremony, the spirituality, that comes first. That should always come first. It is the most powerful. It's like E equals MC squared. The more that we all plant the seed, the faster that it manifests itself. And so here we have a picture of our youth. We took land and water from Lummi, right here, this federally reserved land, and our youth prayed on it. And then we took it to the San Juan Islands, and we gifted our land, water, and our cedar tree to national parks and the Friends of San Juan. And it becomes symbolic that we are becoming one again. And throughout all of the islands and throughout all the Gulf Islands and the San Juan Islands, we brought that land and water and we mixed it, and we did prayer over it, and it becomes symbolic that we are becoming one again. And right here, you might know that we ended up historically fishing in Whatcom Creek for the first time in over 100 years. And so we were able to gift that land and water back to Whatcom Creek in, what was it, last August. The city of Bellingham asked Lummi Nation to go and fish there. And they asked my partner, Troy, the Cornelian, our reef net captain, to go back and to lead our community in this. And we started with our ceremony. And the most powerful thing I knew that needed to happen, would it have to take a male and female youth to be present. And those youth found it in their hearts to work with our elders to hold the ceremony before all the fishing started. And they are the only ones that knew how to speak in the language. Our youth, the ones that had been working with White Swan Environmental to bring this water throughout the San Juans and the Gulf Islands, and then to bring it back to Whatcom Creek. And this is our natural resource chairman that is speaking.
Been fished here for centuries. For centuries. Let them know that we're reviving it. We, the salmon people, are reviving it. You may see a thriving community in this place you call Bellingham. To us, it's Whatcom. Noisy, home of the noisy water. It wasn't just noisy of that fall coming down. This creek was full of fish. Our great-grandfather said there used to be upwards of 300,000 fish in this creek. 300,000. They would make a set right here to feed the whole village, one set. Only took what they could use. And let the rest be about. That's our way today. We only take what we could use. And not to drive it to extinction.
So our youth, because of COVID, we were able to do our field work in the islands like we expected. And let me try to escape from that. And we had to turn a lot of our field work into online. So our youth interns helped create that video. And that's a lot of work to try to do a video. So I really praise them for the work that went into it. And our youth were also ones that fished, but we haven't fished there in 100 years. And it's being degraded by diesel that is draining into that water. And our youth are being involved with town halls to talk about the Lake Padden and the condos that are going to be going into that area, and the water that's being cut off from that area. And one thing that comes to my mind when I'm thinking about the industrial flood that we're still facing, and speaking to the city of Bellingham and them supporting Truth and Reconciliation or Truth and Healing, or stating that they support it. When we think about Lake Padden, and we have the questions that I had in my mind and had dialogue with the city of Bellingham was, did you have government to government consultation with the tribes? It's in writing that they didn't have to do that. So then one of the other sites that I wanted to show you was, how do you get out of here? Here it is. So the endangered species. So if you go to this endangered species site, it's recommended that they have consultation with the tribe.
You're not screen
So,
sharing.
I'll screen share. It's recommended. So why is that being said? And then one of the things that our natural resource staff wanted to know was, did they fill out a SEPA application? And that SEPA application was not filled out. And is this an endangered species area at Padden? And yes, it is. Salmon spawn there, and water is life. So what's the problem? What's the why is there such a conflict? You know what I'm seeing? I want to go back to that page that I had. So I can say, taking care of our homelands. And then one, how have Indigenous people been affected by colonization and changes in climate change? We kind of went through that, right? We all have an idea of that. I wanted to show you that we do have a video called Safe Passage in the Salish Sea that can talk about the impacts that we're having. But like I said, the true cultural spiritual genocide will begin when we forget that we're salmon people, that we're all salmon people indigenous to Mother Earth. So at Whatcom Creek, I want to go back here. Sacred sounds. I showed you the Saanich map. I wanted to share with you Safe Passage in the Salish Sea. That's on our website under videos if you would like to watch it, and also how we had the first responders for the Atlantic salmon spill. Troy was one of the first responders, and we're lucky that we have the knowledge of our older generation to know how to think like a fish, the Atlantic salmon that were released out there, and that they can do their old seining and they can do their old staking poles, and they were able to capture all of those invasive fish that are actually infecting other life forms that are out there. So please watch those. And then we get down to what role can Indigenous people play in developing, managing, and protecting the environment for all? And that's where we've been leading to with White Swan Environmental. So we've been working closely with National Park Service. You can see a video on the website with the superintendent and myself. We would like to have a house of healing, house of learning back into that area. We are so fortunate that we're making it into the Biden administration, where we have our first Department of Interior secretary that is Native American. And so there's hope. There is hope that we can receive support to help with a thriving culture and thriving environment. You can also read a good article. I don't know if you have heard of it, but I wanted to share it with you. And it is from, it's How the Potlatch Contributed to the Fisheries Management by Ronald Trosper. So when I'm talking about how wonderful it would be if we had a Coast Salish Tribal Heritage Field Institute with 7 longhouses in the San Juan Islands and 7 longhouses in the Gulf Islands, that we can help educate people on how our natural system worked and how we can learn to share wealth with each other. That would be absolutely wonderful. So when I keep on a policy level, how can we ensure that Indigenous people are included in decision-making and management of their natural ecosystems? We're in climate change. So even right now we have like the Wild Fish Conservancy, who are looking to the Indigenous methodologies and ways of knowing to help protect the environment. We did have a meeting with the mayor, and we're asking you, if you do, we have our Quaker partners who are putting a draft letter together for us to help present to the city of Bellingham to support a house of healing, house of learning longhouse at Whatcom Creek. We used to have a village site there. So imagine a L-shaped longhouse, contemporary, like the Lummi Indian Business Council building, where we can build knowledge democracy into this facility, that it could be a friendship center, where we can go outside the bounds of the reservation in which our ancestors have been placed, and through 9th through 12th grade programming, which we partnered with Whatcom Intergenerational High School, which has critical literacy, intergenerational learning, and phenomenon-based learning. For White Swan Environmental, wanting a balance between Indigenous and Western ways of knowing, those three focus areas are something that we can relate to as Indigenous people. and that we can invite our principal to be Native, invite our teachers to be Native, invite Healthier Washington right now has they're looking at, I like to say, systems of care and wraparound services. We know that our Lummi people already know how to do that. To invite our Lummi people in to hold space in the Longhouse, to share how we do our wraparound services and systems of care, and help meet Generation Forward, Whatcom County Health Department, with their goals and their needs of envisioning a future where all Whatcom County children thrive. How do we envision a future when our people are erased from our ancestral homelands? And we're not asking to be put in a corner. We don't, and it's not really, this House of Healing, House of Learning is not related to the Longhouse that's going to be going up at Western. We envision Huxley Environment of College being able to wrap their wings around 9th through 12th grade programming. We envision BTC Culinary being able to come in. We envision Children of the Setting Sun being able to go in and help complement the curriculum development with videos. We envision Lummi Community Development Financial Institute being able to hold space in there. We envisioned that that's a opportunity zone. So for wealthy people, being able to place their dollar for dollar tax relief into that House of Healing, being able to look at the mitigation factors, because North Cascade Institute, which is mostly developed for wealthier white people, and that has been set at a professional development conference, but they got that 100% paid for. And if it could be mitigated, then we should be able to get mitigation as Indigenous peoples. We envision it to be right by the Maritime Heritage Building, right below the Red Hall building. And we are asking for that because right now they have phase 2 waterfront district sub area plan, and we have a copy of that right there. You can look at it online. It's for the waterfront development, and they do have it written in there. Kelly Linville and April Barker were very considerate to be able to write in the fact that to have more than just kiosk, more than just storyboards, but actually have presence and education. So imagine having, if you've ever been to the Wecleyan to see where we held our gathering, to have that so people can come in and they can share who they are. And this becomes sovereignty treaty protection. And that's what our BC chiefs always remind us of, that we come from more than the postage stamp reservations in which we've been placed. So we do have our House of Healing, House of Learning 2-page proposal. We would like to start at the Maritime Heritage Building. There's a lot of homelessness that we are dealing with right now. And I think a lot of people just want to know their value and their purpose in life. And if you ever watch the story, the story about the totem pole that was placed at the Seattle, there was a gentleman who was killed by a police officer, and his brother had was going to carve a storyboard. And if you ever see that video, you look at the homeless people that went in and they laid their hands on the storyboard, and they helped, they would help sand it, they would lay their hands on it. But look at the beginning of the video to the end, and you can see their complexion was getting better. They were taking part in something that was meaningful to them. They were of value. And that's what I've seen. That wasn't pointed out. It's just something that I've seen. We're asking the city of Bellingham to partake with the National Park Service. We'll be doing more work with national parks. And from what I've heard from the city of Bellingham, they received a grant for that area from national parks, and also from the Department of Interior. And they would like that area to be a satellite national historical park, because that's where the first settlers went up, Roeder and Peabody. And then they built a sawmill there, and the sawmill was degraded the salmon. But I would like to see true stories being told, you know, like that was where Chowitsu, our first Lummi leader, brought Russell Peabody and Henry Roeder, and Chowitsu was the signatory for the 1855 Point Elliott Treaty. He brought Peabody and them up in 1852, but he was also the signatory for the Saanich Nation. So that little inlet that I showed you on the website map with the swan, the Saanich Nation. And isn't that amazing? So it shows our kinship system that Chowitsu signed the Douglas Treaty over here to fish us formally. And then he goes over here and he signs the 1855 Point Elliott Treaty to fish at our usual and accustomed. How smart is that when you know that your brother, your high CM, your respected elder is your brother and your sister salmon. They're your brother and your sister salmon. And here you're showing the kinship system across this imaginary border. And then you have Saanich and Lummi here. We have the Clacklamish from the 1800s, which they think the Clacklamish went extinct, which I don't think so. I think we know who the family is. So this is a national park. How about we have them oversee this? So we need help getting that. And now that Deb Holland is in, we need some letter writing to Deb Holland to say, we want this to be a satellite national historical park. We want a house of healing here and there, and we want one here. So let's start with that. And then this is what we're going to do. It's adding to our curriculum development here. And this will be a project that we're doing with parks. This is Galiano. It's all this biodiversity right here. And Canadian Regional District, like our unaffiliated Duwamish who got left out, the community healing work is the CRD helped one of the Penelakut and the Mulchi. They got their village sites blown up. And one was recognized, one wasn't. So it caused animosity between tribes. And now they're getting land back and they're going to build a longhouse there because of this vision that's carried forward. But Immerse, they're multidisciplinary scientists and they're helping us. They wanted to help in any way they could. And because of this symbol right here that looks like concentric circles, when he showed it to me and he says he wanted to help White Swan Environmental, I reached out to him because this is on the creation stone where the creator threw the stones and created the islands for our people. And the creator threw the stones and our people returned to the ancestral homelands. So in the treaties, it talks about like how the waters that run from Mount Baker are the teardrops of the mountain. And our elders have said that teardrops are the most powerful form of prayer. So I have to believe that this is where the healing work begins and that we can create an educational program that will help with community healing and it will help with knowledge democracy. So what's going to happen is our curriculum, 9th through 12th, but then going from K through PhD, it will be held in this. The biodiversity of national parks will go in here. Then all Straight Lake Salish language can go in here. Right now, there's a video from Florence James that's on the sea slugs, where she talks about the climate change and the endangered species, and she does song and dance. So we get to share who we are as a people, and our language gets to go in here. But not only our language, all language. So if I go back to here, and I know we're running out of time, I think this closes at 12, but I want to show you this census tract right here. So you've probably seen this, but here is downtown Bellingham, and here's the tract that's by the Maritime Heritage Building. It's on this side, and we can see an L-shaped longhouse here, and that would be tax relief area, but we need support for it. And Bellingham needed low-income housing. There's not enough. And this area is, Parberry has 4 years to be able to purchase this land. But what if we had this beautiful friendship center, 9th through 12th grade programming when it's full, at full capacity, WIHS students can come in here. And we're only 1%, so don't worry about us taking over everything. We would definitely not have enough people to do that. Or moving in, or taking all the clams, or killing the deer, because that does happen. I heard that at I'm on the National Monument Advisory Committee, and people were worried about the quality of life in our ancestral homelands that we were removed from, and worried about the natives coming in and taking the clams and killing the deer. And I'm like, we have skilled hunters. I don't think we would be doing that. But here they want, imagine an international district where people can honor their language, they can honor their culture, they can teach us how we should treat them. Because you see, with our last administration during Indigenous Peoples Day, it was on CNN, where you had Black people, Indigenous people, and white people, and they were having conflict. And there was an Indigenous man, and he was drumming, and he was hoping to break up the conflict. And then the young white students start tomahawking, and it's just that we don't understand, because we haven't been taught, because it's not taught in schools to understand each other's culture and to respect each other and to honor the Maori, honor the Indigenous. But I can tell you, as an Indigenous person myself, if an elder came and he started drumming like that, you know what our community, our youth would do? They would be quiet, and they would respect him, and it would calm the situation down. I got to attend Bellingham Unitarian Fellowship and listen to how the community that helped volunteer for the canoe journey, how they responded to it. And one of the men that were there, he says, it was amazing. He said, because when you walked into the community building, he said the youth, they were not on their phones, and they were focused on their culture and their language, or they were focused on their dance. And so that's what we need, is the thriving culture, because I've witnessed the changes in our community, and our culture is healing. Our language is medicine. Our way of life can help all people, not just through the acquired treaties, but also through our Indigenous knowledge system, our traditional ecological knowledge, that we would be able to do the restoration work. But when I think of observing our youth and our tribal journeys the last 20 some years, our youth, when I first start following our son around, they would wear baggy pants with gold chains, with their hat backwards, with their boombox rap music. But the next year we went and followed, they had medallions made out of cedar. Now it looks like a gold medallion, but now it's a medallion with cedar. The next year you come back, they have regalia on. Then they're learning their song and dance. And then tribal journeys in Campbell River. It was the first time their 10 tribal chiefs came together. They were always in conflict with each other. It was their first time to stand together and dance together since contact, because the non-native placed them on little postage stamp reservations, and they knew who they were and where they come from, so they fought with each other over that territory. And now they were coming together. And so our Indigenous starting to learn, we go back to our old systems and our old ways and our old teachings, our inherent birthrights, our sacred gifts from the Creator, so that we don't have that conflict anymore. And so when we observe tribal journeys, we see communities that are being inspired by our youth, that it decreases they have drug and alcohol-free journeys, and that 50 people is turned into 250 traveling on the canoes, and that it's making our people healthier by remembering who they are and where they come from. So your support in this process would very much help us. So we do have lettering campaigns. We have What is Truth and Reconciliation? We know that Truth and Reconciliation is going to come through. Deb Holland already wrote about it. We want to mirror friends and relatives from Canada with the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of the Indigenous People. We have Deb Holland in there, so we got a good chance. We are saltwater salmon people, including you. And then we want help with the waterfront development. And if you want to know about the adjudication of the Nooksack, that reminds me, like I said, it's exhausting watching our system. There is a problem. Institutional racism is embedded into our system. Those are harsh words. It's not our fault. It's not. Because we have, much like watching CNN with George Floyd, why do we have to go through so much money being wasted when we know common sense shows this man was murdered? You know, why do we have to do that? Why do we have to do this, go through adjudication for 10 years when the salmon people are almost endangered at 5% or below, when we have treaty rights? Let's just honor the treaty rights and save the salmon people. What is the solution? So I would sure like to know, what is the solution? And all we can do is the best job we can do through White Swan Environmental, and that is through supporting Truth and Reconciliation in Whatcom County, supporting it at a state level, supporting the UNDRIP, and ensuring that we're honoring the first people of the land and utilizing this since time immemorial. So that's why we want to do the 9th through 12th grade programming, because 98% of common schools are located off reservation. So we're building curriculum that will honor the first land and honor the Truth and Reconciliation, and allow non-Indigenous ability to carry it through, while still getting our kids credit when they're in the field, and our culture bearers credit when they are teaching our children, which we know is a gap that is not there. But if you have not heard of salmonneedswater.org, that's about the Nooksack and Lummi adjudication process. And then there is also a video called Salmon Need Water, and that's 3/25/21, and that is on YouTube. You can watch that as well. And that's about 11:57.
Oh, wow. I wouldn't have.
There's a to-do list, moveon.org. It had a petition that was done by the health department, and I feel like I disappointed them, because they thought everybody was just going to sign it. And I said, it's, you know, Indigenous people understand challenges and how slow the process is. So reconciliation is what I asked people. Take action every day, every day, every day. You got to do something every day, and you got to build the people who are willing to do something every single day. Because otherwise it's like the Kardashian reality show, and we just switch it off, you know, and turn it off. And we don't want to be doing that. There's not enough time. We're in survival mode. This is, if you look at our work, was our hereditary chief who helped guide our work. He says, if you don't do it, who's going to do it? If you don't do it, who's going to do it? And he's been on panels for decades, and nothing ever changes in Whatcom County. So if you hear him on the panel audio on our website, on the Indigenous Truth Washington, you're going to hear him ask for help. And that's what I carry on. He has passed. I was fortunate to help be his caregiver for the last few months of his life, and I'm honored for his help. And so I go out of my comfort zone, and if the Creator gives me an opportunity to share my voice for the future generations, then I'm a shy person, but that's what I do, because the Creator gave us a sacred responsibility, and we're running out of time. Thank you all for listening and your patience.
Well,
It was wonderful. It was wonderful.
it didn't take patience. I think everybody was fascinated the whole time telling us things.
You know, I'm going to kind of jump into the front of the line, because I have to go in 1 minute with 12. But Shirley, it was beautiful. Your vision is beautiful. It's extremely well thought out and organized. I had no idea such a gem was growing in our midst. It was just beautiful to listen to. I loved that it was about we rather than me. It's a community-minded approach that's full of integrity. And you know, I'm on board for whatever you need. I just thought it was, I really applaud you for your vision.
Thank you very much. And I would hope that when that letter comes out, it'll be something that you will sign. And, you know, if we don't have an idea and we don't spread the idea will not grow. And we have people that we just need to influence and just say, we're aware of this and we support it. Don't worry, I'm not going to be able to build the longhouse myself. You can watch Protecting Our Heritage. That's a part of our work, but we have elders who understand the sacred elements that go into the building of the longhouse. So there's a lot of work that we all can do. But I know you all have to go, so have a good day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. When I first contacted you, I didn't know whether you'd be willing to speak to us or not, but I'm glad you were. Thanks so much.
This was wonderful. And yes.
Thank you all for coming too.
Yeah.
we will
Yeah.
support.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
We'll be in touch. Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay.
That's amazing. That once again shows me, and I read the most amazing article. It was from African-American man who is part of the Sierra Club. And he talks about inclusivity, and he was invited up to Vermont to the chapter up there to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And he was pretty blunt. They said, what can we do to encourage people into our chapter? And he said, you're not going to do anything. You're a lot of older white people. Where are you going to find an African-American? Don't be token. It's not going to happen. It's not going to help. Reach out and find out what you can do to help them. And that was so, that came back to me when what she was saying. You know, it's so easy to say, why don't we invite someone in to be part of, part of our board, part of our league? No, we have to go out and find out what we need to do for them. That is
Right. Yeah.
so obvious. It's too easy for us to say, oh, let's focus on getting someone into our community, and that's it, we've done it.
So this has really been, thank you so much, Jean and Jane, for pulling this together.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
And we need to look for that letter when it's out. And I think it would be really helpful to come up with the kind of actions that we can take on a daily basis,
Right.
Monday this, Tuesday, whatever it's going to take for us to be that action every day, because there's so many things that bombard us.
Mhm.
I would like to have that, I could wake up in the morning and punch this.
Right,
Well, I don't
right, yeah.
do that for you.
But
But I'd like to get some more information and that we can actually sit. I mean, I was trying to take notes frantically and I finally gave up. And there was so much material that she had that if we could share that and ask her if we could share that, that would be nice so we could read more about
For
some of this
years,
stuff.
and it's really developed amazingly.
Maybe it's all on the internet. We just look it
I
up.
think a lot of
I think it is, yeah.
But it'd be nice to
Angel.
share the links, Jean, if you have them.
White
Judith.
Institute.
It looks like everything's on their website, but I think the one thing that caught my interest was when she mentioned Kelly Linville and the water development and how they're planning on putting in some things to honor white people that first came to water. So it's like, that's something easy. We can just say, no, you just have to stop and rethink that idea.
Yeah,
That's a good point. Yeah.
Council now.
right. Excellent. I got to run, people. This has
Okay.
been great.
Bye, you all. Yeah,
you.
looking forward to figuring out how we can help this effort. Yeah.
I'll send out the link to the recording because it's supposed to be is recording and you can double parts of it. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, great. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.